Dr. Michael Weinberg is a board-certified behavior analyst, doctoral, and a licensed psychologist for more than 30 years. He has much experience in the application of behavior analytic services to various populations, and he is adjunct faculty at Brigham and St. Joseph Universities, writes and instructs graduate courses to train behavior analysts, as well as supervising those seeking BCBA and BCABA certification in behavior analysis. He studied at the E.K. Shriver Center in Waltham, Massachusetts, under the direction of Dr. Murray Sidman, where he earned his BA in psychology from Northeastern University. He received his PhD in 1985 in the experimental analysis program at Temple University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Director of Psychological Services at Southbury Training School in Connecticut, clinical director for adult director of ABA services at Devereaux in Pennsylvania and Florida. Dr. Weinberg is currently director of professional development at Amego Inc. and founder of Orlando Behavior Health. He has a particular interest in treating individuals with self-injurious behavior and other serious problem behaviors, and has co-authored a chapter on the Handbook of Juvenile Justice on use with PBS with this population. Dr. Weinberg is on board of directors and past president of CTABA state chapter and the trustee of Chambers Center for Behavioral Studies. Also, Bill Marsh, who is a board certified behavior analyst and behavior analysis educator. He currently is employed as a clinical coordinator for Amego Incorporated. Bill received his Master of Science degree in psychology from Brigham Young University, where he specialized in behavior analysis and learning theory. He's an author of several research publications and presentations on the functional assessment of behavior in applied settings. Bill has also been a state of Florida certified trainer of certified associate behavior analyst candidates. He also has been a supervisor, trainer, and consultant providing in-home residential and school behavior analysis services, and continues to conduct research in the field of applied behavior analysis. And I'm going to go ahead and this is a complicated topic, but quite interesting. A little something about functional assessment that I found very interesting when I was going through it, and might be quite valuable to all areas of behavior analysis. And I'll turn it over to Mike and Bill at this time.
Okay, all right. So good evening, and I hope this comes up here.
It's coming.
Yeah. Here we are. Okay. All right, great. So good evening and welcome. As Tim was just saying, we're going to talk about an approach to functional analysis that Bill and I and another colleague early on had been developing for some time now, and have done some presentations at various state conferences and ABA International as well, on this very different approach that you won't see really anywhere else as far as we can determine. So my piece of it is going to be about why do we need a different approach? And we'll talk about several ethical, policy, and legal and practical reasons why we should do functional analysis in a different manner. So that's my piece of it. Bill is going to give you the nuts and bolts of here's exactly or actually how you would use it, which can be done fairly quickly and readily in just about any setting you're in any real life and applied setting. So let's get into the issues here. So we want to make sure that we're using the same terminology, because there are different terms that go around and different people use. We often talk about functional assessment versus functional analysis to distinguish between what's referred to as descriptive assessment versus doing some kind of a systematic manipulation. Okay, and and the descriptive methods usually include interviews, interview tools. You're probably familiar with them: Marsh, FAST, QABF, and a bunch of others, and then some direct observation. You might do an ABC chart. You might do a scatter plot or some other data collection method. And as you know, those are not going to determine a functional relationship, but they might give you information that will lead to a hypothesis statement. And functional analysis, on the other hand, is used to identify some type of systematic manipulation. Oftentimes, especially the kind that Wada and his associates have been using since their 82 paper for all these many years, is alternating treatments or the multi-element design. And usually what Iwata and his associates have done over the years is analog conditions. You can do it in vivo in the actual setting. Iwata was always a proponent of taking the individual off of the actual real situation, out of the home, classroom, wherever, and going into a smaller room to manipulate and contrive the motivating operations and contingencies to see what would happen so that he could control for extraneous environmental variables, kind of what Skinner always did by having animals in an animal chamber, was to control for extraneous variables. So that's the basic idea of it. So right now we have these issues, these forces, if you will, in the field that have created some ethical dilemmas for behavior analysts, as well as some legal and policy-based, dilemmas for us in the field. So the standard practice by, applied settings is by policy or regulation to use a least intrusive approach to your functional assessment. And that's really just the preference, or perhaps often misunderstanding of administrators that are hiring behavior analysts to provide the services, because they don't quite know our science, they don't know our literature, they just know that if you are going to, engage in a practice that's going to result in the increase in the rate of behavior, which is what the Iwata approach does, they see that as a rights violation. They see that as a potential lawsuit from parents and others if the behaviors get worse and someone gets injured. So we don't see this happening in a lot of places, and there are a couple of locations where these systematic manipulations became pretty much banned. Years ago, they banned it in Pennsylvania, and they banned it in Tennessee. Other states where I've been, like Connecticut, you cannot use systematic manipulations in the public schools or with folks who are funded by the state's Department of Developmental Services, and they had a DDS contract in Connecticut for many years, and they just wouldn't allow it. Just to clarify a little more, in case you're not totally sure of this, so that the descriptive assessment typically incorporates the indirect, like the interviews, as I mentioned, and direct observation. So you have to see the person and observe and gather some data before you're going to, derive some kind of a hypothesis about the function of behavior to develop your plan. Studies that have been done have shown poor reliability and validity of these descriptive assessment tools, such as the ones I mentioned, and you can see here: FAST, MOS, QRBF, FAOF, FAI. Those are some of the different observation and interview tools that are out there, and been around for a while. And these are just some of the authors who've published on those kinds of models and have looked at the reliability or have talked about it. Hanley's paper from Behavior Analysis and Practice is much more of a review of that literature. Iwata has done extensive research and has found very poor reliability of descriptive assessment methods. So yet we're being essentially required, because of the reasons I mentioned, to use these methods, even though they're not as reliable as doing a systematic manipulation. And that is where the problem lies. And so we know that the descriptive assessment doesn't identify the function. And the only known reliable method, at least according to Iwata and his associates that have been doing this for many years, Handley, Vollmer, Dorsey, others that you might be familiar with, is through a systematic manipulation where you're demonstrating a functional relationship. And just be aware also that Skinner talked about that in his book, Science and Human Behavior. In 1953, he had a chapter that was titled Functional Analysis, right? Because the idea is that when we use a single subject design, our objective is to demonstrate a functional relationship between the behavior and the environmental variables of which that behavior is essentially a function. And that's, again, the basis of Iwata and his associates' approach that they've been using for some 40 years now. So as I mentioned, there are regulations in many school districts, and I speak to people all the time. I have students that have been in my online VCS that are from all over not only all over the country, but all over the world, really. And in the United States, anyway, speaking to many different people, and those who come to me for exam prep services that I do, they will tell me that in the schools in many, many places, they're not permitted to conduct a functional analysis for those reasons that I mentioned, that administrators are fearful of what will happen if they were to allow this. And I know I've had situations with students of mine where I told the administrator all the way up to the superintendent, look, we can't, these behaviors are very serious, very dangerous. This student is dangerous in the school and in the classroom. If you want us to really address these behaviors head on, so that this child can function in the school, you need to let us do a functional analysis. And it was, no, it was, the answer was, no, we can't allow that to happen. And so we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And we were Bill and I were years ago in a residential program and here in Florida, and we were coming up against some of these issues, plus the need to find the function pretty quick because we don't have a month to do a lot of full-blown systematic manipulation. So we had to come up with a fast way to do it, which was really part of the impetus as well. And that's a piece of this. Is also, as many of you know, I assume that if you're receiving, even if it's state funding or it's federal funding or it's insurance funding, you're going to get 8 to 10 hours approval to do all of your assessments, including your functional assessment, skills assessment, and write your objectives and submit it to insurance or whomever to get approval. You can't, who's going to be able to do a full functional assessment of problem behavior that a child is coming to us with that's had years of serious problem behaviors in 8 hours, plus all the other pieces. So again, some major reasons in motivation to find a fast, efficient, yet reliable method for finding function. Okay. So we talked about the idea here that we have the, violation of that student's rights, if it's, let's say, a school, or if it could be an adult in a residential home, for example, or even a private home, but it's violating their rights is what we hear. Or another one that we have heard, and Bill can attest to this, is that you're not going to treat, our children or our students like, guinea pigs in a study. They're not for you to experiment with. And so therefore, no, you can't do an experiment. That experimental manipulation is just not permitted here. And so that's another kind of a viewpoint that we get expressed to us often. I mentioned this about some of the states where there are, had disallowed systematic manipulations through DDS-funded individuals, and only descriptive assessments. And my former home state of Connecticut, I'm now relocated to Florida, but that's really what we had to do there with DDS individuals and in the schools was the descriptive assessment. And that can be very challenging to find the function and come up with the right intervention plan. And sometimes it's hard to figure out the function at all doing those kind of descriptive tools. So I know that, one time I want to do a systematic manipulation on the lines of what Bill and I have been developing, and was able to submit a report of a functional assessment based on that. And the state committee that it went to, I think it was chaired by like a clinical psychologist who doesn't know anything about behavior analysis at all, but he's a clinical person, a social worker, and the other person was kind of like an auditor, or kind of a financial person, because they need the financial person in there to make the decision about funding for that individual. And they said, "Oh, we've never seen anything like this before. This doesn't look like a functional assessment to us. You don't know how to do one, do you?" Here we've published papers on this and presented at conferences and have developed this methodology, and they just really had no idea what I was talking about, because it's not anything they were familiar with or aware of. And unless you had your FAST, your MOS, an observation form, maybe an ABC chart, they didn't consider it to be a proper functional assessment of the individual's behavior. So this is the kind of thing that we're faced with, right? With others who are making these decisions about the services that a student or a person gets, and who are not behavior analysts, and yet they are dictating to us what we should do. It kind of goes to, as Joe was mentioning earlier about the field of behavior analysis needing much better representation out there to the public and dissemination. So we really all need to do our job of that. Part of what we're trying to do here, I think, as well. And what we find is that a lot of students in a lot of the programs now, these verified course sequences that lead to certification, because of some of those reasons, I think it's a number of these reasons and various combinations, are not even learning how to conduct a systematic manipulation. About a year, before COVID hit, and we presented at a symposium on this at ABAI. I think we were in Chicago, if I remember correctly, Bill. And one of our co-presenters asked by show of hands in the audience, and it was a packed house, large auditorium, pretty full up, and he asked by show of hands how many of them as students had learned how to do and conduct a kind of a systematic manipulation for functional analysis, and I think just a smattering in that room. And we first said, how many are BCBAs? Yeah, everybody raised their hand. How many of you actually learned how to do that in your program? It was virtually no one. Just a few raised their hand. That was a little bit, took us back, and was really kind of surprising to us. But we can see that these issues that I've been discussing here thus far have been having an impact on how these programs that are training behavior analysts are changing what they're teaching students to do. They're teaching them to use practices that are not going to be reliable and not based on the literature and the evidence. And I think that's a real disconnect, and that's a problem. We know there are many issues to address. This is just one that I'm specifically focusing on here for our presentation. So that's what we see going on. So what are the issues? The descriptive assessment is less reliable than systematic manipulations, and thus interventions are less likely to be effective, and are possibly not addressing the correct function some more recent studies. I think, see, Linda LeBlanc, Florence DeGennaro, Reed, a few others have been doing some studies lately in the last few years where they're showing pretty clearly that interventions based upon functional assessments and functional analysis are much more reliable than those that are not. I think there was one some time ago that came out of Temple with Saul Axelrod. I think there was one there, but Joe might remember that one. And so the problem is that this prolongs the problem behavior. It could possibly make matters worse. And, ethically, we're providing a disservice to that individual and to the school or other program or agency or family if it's in a family home, because we are not being permitted to use evidence-based practices. And that's a real serious matter, serious problem. And also, this can be dangerous. I've had some very, very dangerous clients that I was providing services to that could do a great deal of harm to family members, other students, or perhaps to themselves. And then you're left with very few options in the situation if you can't really find the function, develop an effective treatment plan. So that kind of is what it says here, that, this is going to prolong or delay time to an effective intervention, and it doesn't take advantage of more reliable methods. And so what's the answer? What's the solution? And that's what we, have been addressing. And Hanley in Behavior Analysis and Practice had presented on some of these issues and limitations of the hierarchical approach to functional analysis, assessment and analysis, and there's a link to his article in BAP there. Okay, so here are some of the problems that we might see with systematic manipulation. Well, it increases the frequency of problem behavior. Yep, that's what we're looking for when we're doing the prevailing approach, no matter what the specific methodology is, the philosophy or logic is, going back to that Iwata et al. 82 paper, that when we conduct the systematic manipulation, we want to see what is the contingency that's going to make that behavior occur at a higher rate or probability or frequency of recurrence. That's what you're looking for standardly. The person could be potentially dangerous to self or others. Iwata's approach, usually it's about a month's worth of randomized trials, that go on pretty much daily for about 28 days on average, from what I've read in the literature over the years. That delays the time also to find the function and devise the plan and so on. And then you have to submit it, you have to get approvals, you have to do staff training, you have to set up data collection systems. So it could be a month and a half out before you actually get to an intervention. In the meantime, what's going on with this person and their behavior? Are you managing it with, emergency interventions all the time, or, physical intervention, medication, or what's going on? We think there's a better answer. We think there's a better way. So that's, again, where we're headed here. And so in schools, approval process based on IDA law is another factor that can prolong time to intervention. For home-based services, as you know, you don't get many hours. You've got to find that function pretty quick, but there's no methodology out there I know of that uses that Iwata type approach that can be done in such a short period of time. But we'll talk about that a bit, because there are a few other methodologies that have been advanced in the last several years that I'll mention, I'll touch upon, but we'll talk about why those are also quite different than what we are attempting to accomplish with our approach. So what are the potential solutions? What has been done? And what are ongoing solutions under development? And that's what we're going to turn to next. So there have been, over the years now, for some time, there have been practitioners and researchers who've been working on more brief functional analysis. Wacker, for example, is one who's been doing this for quite some time. I also throw in the name Northrop and Wacker. In '91, did a brief FA for home-based services done via distance means. Wacker's done a lot of interesting work in that regard, training parents to conduct functional analyses over the internet, like he was using Skype, for example. Probably not a good idea, but that's what he was using. And then Hanley et al. Developed something a few years ago called the ISCA, which is the Interview-Informed Synthesized Contingency Analysis. Well, it's a mouthful, but he shortened it to ISCA, that you may be aware of because he's been around talking about it the last few years quite a bit at conferences. There's also one that we published, Marsh, Weinberg, and Hooveris I think that was a reprint in the 2005 Behavior Analyst Today. We originally did it a few years earlier, but this is using, molecular functional analysis was the term that we coined at that time, and still utilize that term for our approach. We ran 5-minute conditions, and then we were able to go through 5-minute systematic manipulations and looked at data at 30-second recording intervals. So that's why it's molecular, because we were taking raw frequencies every 30 seconds versus what Iwata and colleagues have always done, which is take a 20 or so minute session and calculate one single rate measure. They're looking at an average response over that entire time. We're looking at actual raw frequency every 30 seconds. And then inside of about a half hour, 25 minutes really, we were able to identify the function, and then we did an intervention phase with a replacement behavior based on what we found the last 5 minutes, and it looked good, came back, replicated it the next day, and said, we got to get this out, which is what we did, and we put it into Behavior Analyst Today at the time. Another set of methodologies that has been going on for a while now, and you can see one of them here, the Sigafus and Saggers, which is out of New Zealand, which was very intriguing to us, was the single trial or trial-based alternating treatments approach. And there's a few here, Lambert, Bloom, Urban, and then there's Bloom and Iwata as well, 2011, and there are a few others where they were using single trial alternating treatments. Yep, they'll get to you quicker and faster, and you can do it perhaps in analog or in the actual situation or in vivo. However, the one aspect of it that still is making it an approach that's very similar to the standard Iwata approach is that they're still looking at what is resulting in that behavior, producing the highest rate of the behavior. So that's still the purpose of these single trial approaches. Here are just a couple of examples, the Lambert, Bloom, and Urban. So they're looking at, and after summarizing the data from single trial, this is from JABA, you can see escape here, and this one looks like attention for this particular student. So they have 3 individuals. And so what's the function, right? It's pretty obvious that they're going to say it's the one with the highest frequency of the behavior using those single trial approaches. So here for these 2, for Chris and Pat, escape obviously, and for Danny, it's attention. And so that's what they go with in terms of developing the plan. And this is just another one, graph of teaching a replacement behavior and having an alternative response, and just showing that it was effective. Okay, so they use functional communication training to teach the new behavior and extinction of the problem behavior, essentially. Let's see, I'm just here, yeah. And then there's the Lambert et al. Study is another one that was interesting on a trial-based approach. Again, still looking at the highest rate of behavior as the way to identify function. Now with what Bill, myself, and Hooveris did with MFA is we manipulated reinforcers and hypothesized associated motivating operations. We did use alternating treatments designed within session analysis and a moment-to-moment analysis. And that was our old original study that we did in BAT a long time ago. That was just a preliminary study, but what we've done more recently is a completely different methodology. So this is just a sample graphic of what we would present or could present using an MFA methodology. And you can see here, this is in minutes. And these are raw frequencies. These data points represents a frequency for each of those minutes. And you can see, which one is lower, when it's higher. Oops, sorry about that. And then this is just a way to plot it. So just as an example. So the potential benefits are it may be conducted without purposeful evocation of the problem behavior or without purposeful long-term reinforcement of problem behavior. I think that at this point, if I'm not mistaken, this is about where Bill will pick up, okay, on here, and he'll take it from here.
All right, very good. Thank you. I guess I'm going to assume control if I share my content.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Okay.
And I'll stop the screen share here. Okay. Yep. All right.
All
Go
right.
ahead, Bill.
Excellent. And here we go. All right. Good afternoon and evening, folks. We are looking at this as a very potentially, hopefully, industry-changing way of looking at an alternating way of doing assessment. We believe that the potential benefits of this is going to be a pragmatic, conceptually systematic way of showing a function of a behavior in a very short time and negate some of the other things that we were talking about that might be an ethical dilemma. In order to get to where we were, we saw some things that probably took some definitions that we didn't even have in our language at that time, because we were seeing some things on our ABC sheets. We were seeing, consequences in the consequence column that those may be reinforcers, but not all reinforcers are created equal. And we had to put names to what we were seeing. And we coined some names to help us give us a working definition of some of these things. And one of those is called, we call it an establishing function. And we're going to go into what that is in a minute, but this is going to be the function that matters. And we turn the other things that were acting as reinforcers, but they weren't the one that mattered. Those were called partial functions, and they're like fringe benefits. And a good way to show what that would look like is, let's put it in a real situation with you having a job. If you have an MO where you are in deprivation of money and medical insurance, which is my biggest MOs for making sure that I have, the work I need. Those are my two big things. It evokes me to search for a job, and then I obtain and keep a job. And that gives me cash and medical benefits. And we're going to be naming that the establishing function. Now, let's talk about what the establishing function does and why it's named that, and how that works and how it leads to assessment. The establishing function does three things. The first thing it does is that it, let's see here, the number one there, my arrow didn't translate there in the very good in the color there, but as you see down here, number one, the cash and medical benefits definitely reinforce me keeping this job and having this job. Now, granted, there are two behaviors here in the behavior column of the ABCs, so what we're going to be concentrating on, mostly searching for a job. At that point, the cash and medical benefits do reinforce the behavior. Number two, as you see at the top, it mitigates the MO. It gets rid of that MO that's evoking my behavior to search for a new job. And then number three, that behavior now goes away and drops out of searching for a job. So once again, it reinforced the behavior, it mitigated the MO, and it dropped the behavior that got evoked by that MO. Now, when I have this job, I could have partial functions as dental and vision plan, which are kind of cool. But like I mentioned before, those are fringe benefits and not the reinforcer that mattered. If I got rid of, if my company said we're no longer going to supply dental and vision plans, would my behavior of keeping my job go on extinction? No, because although it is probably acting as some reinforcer, it is not the reinforcer that's going to quote unquote matter. It's not the establishing function. It's not connected to the MO that's evoking my behavior. So if we took my dental plan away, what would happen? I probably would not resign. However, if my cash paycheck and my medical benefits were to leave, then my behavior would leave. So we say we can find the establishing function by a couple of different ways. Back in 2001, we looked at testing which reinforcer removal would cause extinction versus which would not. And of course, this has to do with the history and other schedules of reinforcement that would determine whether there's been a resistance to extinction or not. But most importantly, we find out which reinforcer drops away the behavior of interest on a moment-to-moment analysis. So let's look at this really quickly. I got a very short time here, so I'm going to run through some of this really quickly here. Just imagine looking for your keys. And if you're looking at the consequences on an ABC sheet of I look underneath my couch or look on a bookshelf or look on a desk, different consequences happen to me if you're taking descriptive data. I find an old remote. I find a checkbook. I find $20 on the couch. All those things are consequences for me rummaging. However, after a period of time, I finally find my keys. Now, once you find your keys, as you see here in phase 6 of this graph, my searching behavior drops away because no one continues to search for their keys once they're found. Once your MO's been mitigated, that searching behavior drops away. And the reason we're going to call the keys the function of the behavior is because they mitigated that MO. The behavior dropped away. The $20 couldn't do that. I found on the couch. That's nice. And it probably reinforced my behavior of searching the couch, but it didn't drop my behavior away. So we're looking for things that drop the behavior away on a moment-to-moment analysis. And this kind of thing happens. It's not new. We do the same thing with a baby. Okay. The parent begins looking at MOs and they start giving the reinforcer that they believe is connected to that MO to see which causes the baby to stop crying. We don't take a baby offline, put it in a room, and do things to it to see what causes it to cry the loudest and the longest. And that is essentially the traditional going way of finding function, is to find out which things cause the highest rates of behavior in a aggregate molar look. So in a molecular look, we would look at what ceases the behavior in a moment-to-moment analysis to help identify the function. And in interest of time, I'd like Mike to be able to wrap up in the next 4 minutes. So if you would like to, Mike, I'll get to give control back to you. And we'll go from there. And let's see here. Okay, I am trying to make you host, and I'm not sure if it's happening.
Looks like it's happening. I think he's host now.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, Mike, I think you're muted.
All right. How's that? Better?
There we go.
Sorry about that. I thought I had unmuted. So this is just a quick example of some data that we got fairly recently. We have an adult in one of our residential group homes. Doesn't speak, but can
I'm
use
not
an
sure you're
app on
sharing
it.
your screen at this point, though, Mike.
It's not.
He's got a slide up there. Recent demonstration. Is that the slide you
Okay.
have?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, very
It's
good.
there. Oh, okay. So anyway, so this is the individual, and his behavior was getting up at night and vocalizing loudly, which of course late at night or overnight is going to wake up all of his housemates, right? So I worked with the attending BCBA in that home, and I went through our procedure using our, approach, which is essentially single trial, alternating treatments methodology to help find the function. And we went through 4 different conditions, and we set up all of the conditions, and then she ran it in the home to help find the function. And so after several trials of each, we ran several trials randomized of each of those 4 different functions. And then this is essentially what we found. Now, this is a slightly different way than you might be familiar with for depicting these kind of data, but since this is a single trial, what I thought I would do is in the 3D bar graph to show you what happened on each and every trial, even though remember, they were randomized. So we had, notice access continued, escape continued, automatic behavior, well, continued. But what made the behavior stop in each of those trials is down here. So remember, you're looking at this flip-flop of the standard Iwata type methodology. It's not the highest rate that we're looking at as the function, it's the lowest rate that's the function on each of these trials. And see, every time, and no matter what random order it was in, it was always attention. So now we found the function, and then the BCBA was able to develop a plan based on finding the function. And this is a systematic manipulation. It's a reliable methodology. It doesn't take long to do it. You can just randomize those trials, which is a lot of what the standard prevailing methodology is for a single trial, alternating treatments. And that is really basically, the finding and the demonstration. And we think that this could well be a game changer in how we go about functional analysis out there. And right now, Bill and I are working on have a manual that we've submitted, and hopefully this will get accepted and published as a book. So this is our contact information if you want to get in touch with us and have any further questions. And I thank you for your time. And Bill, thanks you as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.